So you've already watched a video on how to develop research questions, but let's go over a couple of things that are important for you to remember. Remember that a research question is clear, meaning that it provides enough specific information that anyone can understand it without needing any additional explanation. You should not have to explain your research question. It should also be focused in that it should be narrow enough that you can answer it in the page length that is required of you for this assignment. You don't want to have too broad of a question because you're going to have too much information to cover and you're not going to have enough space to do so. It also needs to be concise, meaning that it should be expressed in the fewest possible words. You don't want to use too many descriptors, too many adjectives, just get straight to the point. Your research question also needs to be complex. Your answer should not be a simple yes or no. You need to have a synthesis and analysis of ideas and sources before you even come to an answer. So you should not be able to just answer yes or no to your research question. And finally, it needs to be arguable. Given that this is a persuasive project, you need to make sure that the answers to your question are open to debate rather than accepted facts. You are not simply reporting research on a topic. You are doing research and coming to an informed decision on what the position should be for that particular question. So, what you want to do is make sure that your research question follows all of these guidelines. Let's take a look at a couple of examples so we can better understand how we can make sure that our research question meets these criteria. So, this first sample research question is unclear. How should social networking sites address the harm they cause? This particular question is unclear because we don't really know what such social networking sites we're talking about. Are we talking about social media just in general? I don't know that you could talk about all social media sites in such a short paper. There are way too many to cover. So you're going to want to specify what particular sites that you are talking about. Secondly, we are here implying that the harm is already inherent, that these social networking sites already harm the users in some way. So what we need to do is we need to avoid having a research question that leads us down a particular path and answering and only finding the answers that we want to find. Instead, we want to do all of the available research and come to an informed decision to show our readers that we are credible by doing good research. To make this research question better, we could do this. What action should social networking sites like Twitter and Facebook take to protect users' personal information and privacy? So here, we're giving examples of social media sites so we can narrow our research down. And we're not assuming that they already cause harm. Instead, we're seeing what do they do to protect users' personal information and privacy. We're also naming the harm that we think could happen. So you need to make sure that it is very clear. Here, this question needs a little bit more explanation. But here, we already know what you are going to be researching. This next example is unfocused. What is the effect on the environment from global warming? That is a lot of things to talk about in one particular paper. So we might want to do something like, what environment are we talking about? Are we talking about air, water? Are we talking about the poles? Are we talking about the United States? And specifically, we need to know the effect on whom. So are we talking about people, animals, water, marine life? What are we talking about? So we need to be a little bit more focused here. We could instead have our research question say, what is the most significant effect of glacial melting on the lives of penguins in Antarctica? So we have named a specific environment, right? Penguins in Antarctica. We've named a specific aspect of global warming, glacial melting. And now we'll be able to make an argument saying that this is the most significant effect based on our research. Our third and final question is just too simple. How are doctors addressing diabetes in the United States? Here, what we have is a question that is really just reporting on research. It's not really arguable. There's not really a side that we can take here. So instead, how are doctors addressing diabetes in the US? We could write it as, what main environmental, behavioral, and genetic factors predict whether Americans will develop diabetes? And how can these commonalities be used to aid the medical community in the prevention of the disease? So here, we've got it a little bit more complex. We've named some factors that could predict whether certain people get diabetes, and how can these commonalities be used to aid in the medical community? So we are, in fact, providing a more arguable and more complex research question.